70-year-old Edward Miller woke each morning to the mechanical roar of progress. Beyond the carved frames of his wooden house, a view that would have been science fiction a decade ago now sprawled. Endless, identical high-rises of wet asphalt gray slicing the sky. Oak Street had once, in fact, been lined with oaks. Edward remembered a time of dappled sunlight, of a clear creek that now ran through a concrete pipe somewhere beneath a megamall. His house, a magnificent 1913 American craftsman, built by a Boston shipping merchant, was the last of its kind. It stood on an acre of defiant green, an island in a concrete sea. Apple trees, planted with his late wife Anastasia 30 years ago, still bloomed. Under the oldest one, a bench sat empty, a monument to evenings spent planning a future for their children, Lily and Michael. Now, the sterile residential complexes, the Oaks, green vistas, loomed over his property, their names a cruel joke. "Ed, don't you think it's time?" his neighbor Maria called over the fence. She had sold her own small house 3 years ago for a condo in the Oaks. The move had given her a tidy sum and chronic asthma from the perpetual dust. "They're offering a fortune. You could live like a king." Edward said nothing, tending to the tomatoes in a small greenhouse. It stood where Anastasia's roses used to be. After she was gone, the beauty of the roses was too painful a memory. The knocks on his door were relentless. The latest came from a man in a suit that cost more than Edward's monthly Social Security check. "Mr. Miller, I'm Victor Thompson, CEO of Apex Urban Development," he said with a predatory smile. "We're prepared to offer you $1 million, cash, plus a penthouse condo downtown." Victor Thompson was a man who had built an empire by erasing the past. His company specialized in acquiring land by any means necessary, replacing history with luxury towers that often cut corners on quality. He had connections in City Hall that could make any problem, or any stubborn old man, disappear. "I've told your people 100 times," Edward said, his voice weary from sleepless nights and constant stress. "The house is not for sale." "But why?" Thompson pressed, his smile tightening. "Look at this place. It's a relic. We want to build something for the community here, a state-of-the-art childcare center." Edward knew it was a lie. Last week, Thompson's man had pitched a luxury spa. The week before, an office tower. "A childcare center," Edward said, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "Funny, the papers said you filed for a permit to build a 40-story condominium." Thompson's face hardened. "Listen, old man," he hissed, dropping the facade. "We have the city's backing. We will get this land. We can have this house condemned. We can find 100 code violations. Sell while the offer is generous. It's the smart play." The door slammed shut. The harassment began the next day. The power was cut for emergency repairs that lasted a week. Then the water main burst, a problem unique to his property line. Finally, a backhoe arrived, digging a massive trench across his yard for a gas line inspection, uprooting the 3 oldest apple trees, the ones he and Anastasia had planted when the children were small. He sat on his porch amidst the splintered wood and cried, a quiet, shuddering grief for a pain that was more than just about trees. A few days later, a beat-up Ford sedan pulled up. Out stepped a young man with a laptop, a young woman with a camera, and a stern-faced older man with a briefcase. "Mr. Miller, I'm Luke Davies, an independent journalist," the young man said. "This is Anna, a photojournalist, and this is Samuel Wolfe, a public interest lawyer. We heard about what's happening. We want to help." Wary but desperate, Edward let them in. He showed them the house, a place frozen in time. He showed them Lily's room, her collection of stuffed animals still on the shelves, an unfinished high school physics test on her desk. He showed them Michael's room, a veritable archive of newspaper clippings about environmental protection and unchecked urban development. He wanted to be a journalist, Edward said, his voice thick. He wrote for his school paper about saving the city's green spaces. The story of the car accident 8 years ago came out in halting fragments. A rain-slicked road, a speeding truck, a life with his wife and 2 children that ended in an instant. "This house," he finished, his hand resting on a framed family photo, "is all I have left of them." As Luke was taking notes, another car arrived. A woman, Julia Monroe, and her 8-year-old son, Ethan, stood at the door. "I'm so sorry to intrude," she said. "I'm an architectural historian. I read the article online. Mr. Miller, your house, it's not just an old house." Inside, her eyes widened. She ran her hands over the woodwork, the stained glass windows, the hand-carved banisters. "This is a masterpiece," she whispered, pulling out old city blueprints from her bag. "It was designed by Daniel Reed, a master of the American craftsman movement. It's one of only a handful of his wooden residences left. It should be a protected landmark." The discovery changed everything. Luke's new article, "The Last Stand on Oak Street, A Fight for Memory and a Lost Architectural Treasure," went viral. Anna's photos of Edward's grief-stricken face, of the preserved children's rooms, of the house's stunning details were shared thousands of times. Public support swelled. Volunteers arrived to watch over the house. Students from the local architecture school came to sketch its features. The house on Oak Street became a symbol of the fight against soulless development. Cornered and furious, Victor Thompson played his final card. An official condemnation notice was delivered, signed by the city. A fraudulent engineering report claimed the house was structurally unsound and scheduled for demolition in 30 days. The news was a physical blow. Reading the notice, Edward felt a crushing weight in his chest. The fight had drained him. "Maybe they're right," he whispered to Julia, who had been visiting daily with Ethan. "I'm so tired." "Don't you dare give up now," she said fiercely. "We're filing an emergency injunction. We have the proof it's a landmark." But the stress was too much. That night, Edward collapsed with a massive heart attack. He awoke in a hospital bed to the quiet hum of machines. Julia and Ethan were there. "You're okay," Julia said, her eyes wet with relief. "And the house. Edward, the house is safe." While he was unconscious, the story had exploded. The mayor, facing a full-blown political crisis, had intervened. The city's Landmark Preservation Commission held an emergency hearing and, with Julia's irrefutable evidence, granted the house protected status. The demolition order was void. Better yet, Thompson's web of corruption had unraveled. A whistleblower from his own company, inspired by Edward's story, had leaked documents to the press. Victor Thompson and several city officials were under federal investigation for fraud and bribery. After his recovery, Edward was not alone. At his insistence, Julia and Ethan moved into the big house. It was no longer a silent, dusty mausoleum. It was filled with the sounds of a child's laughter, the smell of Julia's cooking, the warmth of a new-found family. The house on Oak Street was officially designated the Miller House Museum, a living museum where history was not just preserved, but inhabited. The surrounding land, seized from the now bankrupt Apex Development, was turned into a public park. Edward, with Julia by his side, would sit on his porch and tell visitors his story, a story of love, loss, and the quiet courage of a man who refused to let his past be bulldozed. He had fought not just for a building of wood and nails, but for the principle that some things, memory, love, and beauty, are not for sale.
Thank you for watching. What stunned you? Comment, subscribe to Unbelievable But True, share, and check our story catalog. Stay tuned.